So now I would like to introduce you to today's presenter, Jo Gray. Jo is a highly experienced mentoring specialist and has focused her career solely on mentoring for nearly 10 years. She works as part of the international consultancy Clutterbuck Associates, a division of GP Strategies, where she most recently led the business as principal consultant. Jo has a postgraduate qualification in mentoring program design and evaluation from Sheffield Hallam Business School, and she is also training as an accredited assessor for the ISMPE, which is recognized for setting the core standards for best practice in mentoring and benchmarks the mentoring programs of organizations around the world. So with that, Jo, I am excited to have you with us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Kayla, and welcome everyone. Lovely to be talking to you all virtually today. Great that this helps us connect from around the world. Just to give some context, I am talking to you from just outside London, late afternoon, and it's actually a lovely sunny day here. We do actually get some sunshine here in the UK now and again. Obviously, I know we're time pressured. It would be lovely to hear from people, but if anyone wanted to put in a chat room where they are calling in from today, it would be lovely to have a sense of where we all are in the world to help us kind of connect. So as Kayla said, my focus for many years has been mentoring. I feel really, really lucky to be able to do this. We all talk about having a job with purpose and meaning, and I have a huge passion for what I do, mainly because I see it working again and again and again. And only yesterday I was talking with a group of mentees who were sharing all their stories, and 3 months into a program, people were just overawed with the things that were starting to happen for them. So I'm hoping to share that passion with you this afternoon or this morning, or whatever time it is where you are today. So why? If that isn't enough to convince you, why else might you be implementing a mentoring program? Well, you might all be familiar with using it in a talent context. I think that mentoring to support and to enable you to connect with your talented, marked talented individuals in an organization can be a really powerful way to support them, to develop them, and to give them access to the right people so that you're developing their knowledge and learning. Diversity, I think this is one of the common reasons that mentoring programs are often used. It's just a great way to connect people and allow conversations across difference. And it gives people a really safe place to talk about the more challenging issues that often sit around whatever the diversity of initiative might be. Graduates is always a big one. I'm speaking probably from my more UK-based knowledge, but I know that lots of graduates, when they are looking for that first grade role, and the rounds that go around in the UK as graduate take-up and intake goes on, one of the things they will use to identify an organisation that they want to work with is, do they have a mentoring program? They feel supported, they feel nurtured. It's a great way to upskill yourself quickly in a business. So it's, I think, a key offering for lots of big organisations to have. I think also organisations use it in a very clever way with graduates, because you want to upskill your graduates fast and get them involved and embedded in your culture and understand that. So they will use mentors particularly who embody the core values and use them as really good role models for these new intakers to the business. Leadership. Now, I'm sure everyone will have seen some great leadership programs. I think in the world we're moving into with much more blended learning, I think there's got to be so much more going on within a leadership program, and having a mentoring part to that, we see more and more and more now, and having that slot in to allow your leaders not only to be people learning the skills needed, but to connect with the more senior leaders in the business, so they have that practical element of adapting that knowledge and learning those skills within the business. Mergers and acquisitions, and I really mean that in the context, that's an example, but just anything generally where you're needing to break down your organisation where they work in silos. I've worked with many organisations who just try to use the matching of pairs to get people talking across different sectors, and it opens up so many windows for people and a great way to start bringing down a lot of those barriers. The last one there, engagement and retention. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Gallup's 2013 State of the American Workplace study. I found it quite fascinating, stating that only 30% of the nation's workers are fully engaged in their jobs. And that percentage hasn't really shifted since 2013. That's a pretty scary stat, I think. Mentoring is really a recognised way of supporting retention. I've seen, again, lots of organisations implement a program for that reason. It's a nice, easy one to track for ROI as well. also a really a useful approach. So that isn't a finite list at all. There's some that I'm sharing with you there that I hope kind of give a flavour of why you might be using mentoring. So fundamentally then, if you want a program to work, you need to be thinking about kind of these 6 key things that I've put up there. Purpose. I always say when I'm working with organisations, can you describe why you're doing this in 1 sentence? It's really easy to get bogged down in kind of a great big purpose and objectives and long lists, but this is going to be the one thing you use to talk about the program, to advocate, to recruit onto it for the life of the program. So the clearer you can be around this, and the simpler you can make it for everybody to engage in it and understand it, you're starting in a really good place. The next one, is preparation, and preparation for everybody really involved, not just mentors, mentees. Often line managers, we will get involved in some kind of briefing so that everyone is kind of bought into the process. And any other stakeholders you can kind of identify in the business, even those who aren't kind of the direct participants. Really great for everybody to have a sense of what does this mean and how this is going to be a success. But yes, particularly participants need to be fully prepared to get the most out of the relationships. I think one of the key things of any great program is how you're recruiting people, who are you going to be your mentor and mentees, and how you're going to match them. And that needs some really clear thinking up front to get the right people in place and to make that work. Ongoing support. I think rarely is it just enough to offer some initial training and let people just get on with it. In my experience, generally those things, apart from the very committed few, a lot of those relationships just fall by the wayside. You need some momentum in the programs. You need to keep people connecting. You need to offer kind of support and development along the way so those relationships are enabled to develop. And so planning how you're going to do that for your program is a key part of design, I think, as well. Obviously, evaluation, we need to be kind of measuring things and be clear about what those success measures are. I think that needs to be, obviously, will be clearly part of your purpose and come out of that. But really important that there's a structure for capturing that and using that to drive the program. I think all great mentoring programs develop on the formative feedback that you receive across the time of the program, so that you're constantly evaluating, really, and using that to kind of grow and support the program. And for me, all the great mentoring programs I have ever been involved in, the best ones that stand out a mile are those that have one unifying feature, which is an amazing program manager. They are committed, they have their finger on the pulse of what's going on in those programs, they advocate for it, they talk about it in the business, they support people, and they just believe in it, and they kind of keep it alive and breathing and going. So a key program manager role is one of the most important things. So I'm aware lots of people will be running programs, have run programs in the past. Maybe they've been great successes. Maybe they kind of, could have done with something else. A few suggestions here of things that I see and help people with generally if they want to kind of, liven up their program or things that tend to come out. The big one, that works often really, really well if you haven't done it so far is having a senior sponsor for your program. I know that McKinsey shares some research around programs. I mean, they're specifically talking about change programs, but mentoring kind of probably could come under that header. Without a commitment from the top, nearly any major change program will fail. And particularly in mentoring, it's particularly when people are struggling to recruit people, get people signed up, knowing that the business, not HR, are just talking about mentoring as a nice thing, that the business see a real value in it. Somebody senior within the business is advocating for that. That might be as light that they kind of push out a bit of communication. It might be more that they are there and involved in a launch and are willing to talk about their personal experiences of mentoring at the very start. And even better, you might even have them as a mentor on the program as well. I think that kind of leadership and that kind of stand for mentoring really gives it a boost. Another one to look at is, how you're matching. Are you offering people choice? Are you not? Are you doing a mix of that? All the really successful mentoring relationships come down to the level of rapport that people establish. That quality of that relationship starts from those two people getting on. So the matching is the key at the start. And looking at how you do that sometimes will really enliven things, I think. I talked about training before. Are you training mentors and mentees? You'd be surprised how many people that don't even think about doing something with the mentees. And these are the people that have to drive these relationships, have to be committed and have to make it work. They're the ones who ideally are getting the most benefit out of it, if not at all. And if you don't prepare them, it falls on its head again and again and again. A good one to think about is how formal or informal your program is. I think organizations that are very advanced on kind of their mentoring and coaching strategies and have that kind of culture already embedded can probably move to a much more informal place. But I think if you're really kind of trying to, at the beginning of this journey, having a level of formality and some structure without it feeling stifling is important to consider. So that's a good thing to review as well. Obviously, like anyone evaluating is, what are people who've already been involved saying, what worked for them, what didn't. As I said previously, mentoring programs at their best are formative and they really develop based on what they're hearing and what they're noticing. I don't know if anyone's using technology to push their programs. I know once you're getting past 60 pairs, it becomes quite an administrative nightmare to manage. And in fact, I spent a year ago working on a program with about 100 pairs that we matched by hand, which took me about 6 days. Which was madness, to be honest, and I wouldn't want to go through again. There are some great technology tools out there that can help, and that might help smooth over some of the edges of tricky programs. And the other one is, when people often come to ask about, making it sustainable, growing the program. How do we keep doing that? It's just making sure you're capturing those stories. Evaluation is one thing if you're looking for, quantitative measures, but the qualitative stories that you're pulling out of this that you can share really, really drive, I think, program success. So I hope there are a few useful ideas of what you might do there. I don't want to dwell on the negatives too much, but it's always good to learn from other people's mistakes, and maybe they've come through in what I've said so far, really. I've really wanted to emphasize how much, great programs obviously often spend 2 to 3 months planning what that might look like so that they're in a really good place when they launch. Commitment-wise, I think it's just important that nobody is co-opted into taking part in mentoring, because if the commitment isn't there from mentors and mentees, you're kind of doomed from the start pretty much, because it will be challenging and people will stop dropping by the wayside. I guess the roles in the mentoring type come down to a lot around the kind of training you offer people and the support as you kick off. But people really need to understand being a mentor is not being a manager. It's a very different role. And mentees really need to understand, I need to be driving this relationship. I'm not acting in the role of maybe a direct report in this context. It's much freer. And the type issue is around the sponsorship versus developmental. They're two very distinct models of mentoring. And it's important to be very clear what your expectations are around people employing those within your own program. And the final thing, that I said earlier about, the formal versus informal, programs that are micromanaged, and I've seen plenty of them where people are sending out forms, they'd like to know every time people meet, trying to pull out that level of detail on what are ultimately relationships that are trying to be established. It does tend to kill them a little bit. So it's just getting that right for your organization, but being aware that too much management really is going to kind of kill it in the water. So finally, why is it still so important if I haven't sold that across all of this? I just see it working all the time. So starting at, I've shared at the top there, we are working now in an environment where there are kind of up to 5 different generations, I think, that people are saying in the workplace. And I've also seen people describing, it's generational difference being the final frontier for diversity. How are we going to get people working together? And again, if the 75%, I think, of the workforce they're saying will be kind of a millennial generation soon, I've quoted something there from Deloitte's millennial survey. The whole report is full of the needs that millennials have for mentors. So I know the importance of mentoring. I think if you're sold on it already, I'm thinking for people trying to sell this into their business as well. What are those kind of useful things? Again, mentoring just works, and I'm going to quote another couple of things around Northern Illinois University did a study saying, finding that mentoring can help to reduce stress and impact on burnout. And there's a great story in the UK where a lot of prisons are using mentoring and having huge success in reducing reoffending rates, which, who can say that isn't a great thing to be doing, although that might not be relevant for everyone's organisation. And I think leaders, never more are we, have our leaders been pressured to be more human, authentic, connect with people, all of those things. And I think mentoring gives people a really safe place to develop and practice these skills and to allow people to connect and talk openly and be themselves and develop that. And as you can see, I love that quote there about successful leadership that some research DBI did. By a single ingredient, it's just mastering successful conversations, and that's what mentoring at its core really is. It's enabling people to have those great skills which flow into so much else. So that's my bit there. Thank you for listening for now. Kayla, handing back over to you. Thanks.
Thank you, and thanks, Joe, for that great presentation. It looks like we've got about 3 minutes left in our 20-minute segment, so just as a reminder, if you have a question for Joe, just answer it or ask it in the Q&A module at this time, and I will do my best to get to all of them here within the next few minutes. She covered a lot within 20 or less than 20 minutes, so be sure there's more information to discuss. We have her contact info on the last slide of this deck. This will also be emailed to everybody who was on the call, as well, in addition to a follow-up blog post where she'll be addressing some of today's key takeaways. This should come to you within the next 24 hours or so. There's about a few questions coming in, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to the Q&A portion. So this first one is, should the mentees have a say in who their mentor is?
Hi, I think best practice would tell you yes, it's great because the commitment is just so much stronger when they do. Yeah, the downside to that is it becomes a much more arduous process because there's a lot of toing and froing because people will then, and you're going to have to do it in quite a different way by showing people different options, and then they're going to make a selection, and kind of managing that process can be more challenging. But I think the outcomes of that are that generally your mentees are really committed and signed up to that process. And obviously you can see on the flip side of that, if they have had no choice in it and they're unhappy with that selection, then you've got a whole different thing to negotiate there. So yes, ideally do give a choice.
Great. The next question that just came in, would you do things differently if your mentoring program was aimed at leaders or millennials?
Well, at its core, as I've kind of probably gone through there, you know, great program design is probably the same. However, it's thinking about how you're putting people together. So, what have you know, we all design these things thinking we know the best ideas. I think it's great to program design to include the people who are going to be those participants, and what are they looking for? Who would they like to be working with, and getting that experience, particularly around millennials, getting that experience gap right. Often I find people it's challenging to put kind of very new people in an organization or younger people with somebody who's 20 years ahead in their career, because it's just the learning gap is so wide. So there are kind of some subtle things to consider as well as you put those, as you design that program, definitely.
Great. I feel like there's about 4 more that have already come in. So if we do, we're going to wrap it up here in the next minute or so. But if we do miss yours, we will be following up with a blog post where Joe will be addressing everybody's questions. So this will be emailed to you tomorrow. So on to the next question. Who should serve as mentors? What factors should play into the mentor selection?
Yeah, very hard, because one person's great mentor is not necessarily another's. That's always quite hard to define what is that great mentor. I think it's what you're trying to, who you've identified as your mentee pool, which should always be kind of be at the core of what you design, and who are going to be the best group of people to support that. So like I said, if it's at a graduate level, you know, how far ahead do people need to be able to and still be able to relate to the challenges that you're having at that point in your career, but also have enough depth of knowledge and wisdom to kind of be a useful learning partner for somebody. I think there are some obvious good things that great mentors do, which will all come down to the core kind of they're good listeners, they believe in self-development, they develop themselves as well as kind of doing this with others. Those type of, you know, that kind of very broad stroke approach. I think they also, a good sign for me every time I work with people as signing people up as mentors are, you know, do they see this as a two-way learning opportunity? Do they see genuine learning in the process? Then I think people can be developed to have some of the great mentoring skills. It's having the good intent and that understanding that this is a joint process as well, that I think people start in a good place. Yeah. hope that helps.
All right. We're going to take two more because we are a little bit over time, and then the rest of them we'll address in the blog post. So the next one, in terms of evaluating the program, when is the best time to request feedback from mentees? 3 or 4 months after completing the program, or is there a better approach?
Ideally, I think you want to be doing it as you go along. So definitely, I wouldn't wait till long past the end. I would be doing something kind of at 4 to 6 months probably, because you get a picture of, did people have enough at the beginning? What are they starting to notice? And this allows you to intervene if things are kind of floundering for anybody. So I think it's good to pick up some kind of early feedback that you can build on, and then then again at the close. And of course, it comes to what your what your purpose was at the beginning. So dependent on what you're tracking. So lots of people will track something like retention figures. Well, obviously, that might not be so kind of such elucidating data at the midpoint. That's something you'd kind of be picking up more clearly at the end.
Okay, so the last question that we're going to hit on right now during the live call is actually one that I hear a lot, especially because sometimes these words tend to be used interchangeably, even though they probably have a different definition. But is there a difference between mentoring and coaching, and if so, what is it?
Oh gosh, the big one, so to the end. Right, let me think how I'm going to position this. I find in the UK, and I'm speaking from maybe a UK perspective here, most of the big academic establishments that offer master's programs pretty much blur the lines. Because at its core, to me, if you're coaching someone, if you're mentoring them, you are using the same skills. So you are using your active listening, deeper listening. You are using great questioning skills. You are offering people quality feedback and support. You're being a sound. All of those core things, I think both coaches and mentors are doing, and that is a kind of a core skill set. I often think it's the context that it's applied in that maybe is the difference. So people will often say coaching will be much more performance focused and done in a maybe a bit more tighter and focused way. So with a kind of a 6-month approach, and maybe they're kind of more stakeholders in what's the intent of this for this individual that we are going to be coaching. Mentoring tends to be a bit bigger picture, focusing on the horizon, much more kind of driven by mentees and focused on whatever they want to kind of take to the table under the boundaries of how that program's been set up. But I always say they're much more similar than they are dissimilar, really. And if you can get away from some of the titles, often that just frees you up to get on with having a really good conversation. I hope that helps. That's my own personal summary of the difference. I know everyone will have a different one.
That was great. I know these Q&As can be difficult sometimes because they can kind of catch you off guard depending on the question. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up, though, because we are almost 5 minutes over. So I appreciate everyone staying on the call. I do apologize if we did not get to your question on the live call. We will be sure to address them in the blog post, which will be coming out tomorrow. Joe, you will have your hands full. There are several that are coming in. So for now, thanks again to today's speaker, Joe Gray, and thank you to everyone who attended for your time and attention. We do hope that you'll join us again for our next session. As part of our Q2 theme, Learning as a Lifestyle, this one is focused on work-life synergy and self-directed learning. This one will be held on April 27th, but for now, I'm Kayla Ross, and I wish everyone a great day. Thank you again.